You're live.
Okay, I'm live. Hey, friends, this is Dan Burke. Welcome to the Apostolic VA. It's sponsored by Apostolic VA. Transformational Lent in a Year of Spiritual Progress webinar. I'm glad you're able to join us. My seat is not working for me very well here, but one thing, we are having difficulties with my camera. So if I go in and out, you don't have to tell me. You'll just have to tolerate it as part of your penitential practices. But I'm going to be running through a presentation for you. We'll go ahead and jump into that. And Jordan, I'm assuming you'll just tell me if something's not working right. All right. So let's go to the opening prayer. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Lord, help us, be with us, be present to us, reveal to us ways that we can follow you more completely during this upcoming season of Lent, that it would not just be a typical time where we flail into it haphazardly and choose to do silly things that have nothing to do with our eternal salvation or what it means to draw near to you, but instead we might have a more rich and full and complete perspective on what we need to do, what we need to know, and how we need to walk during this season of Lent. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. So just as an outline of what we're going to do tonight, some of the things I'm going to say are going to be very strong. I know I have people on that don't know me. And for those who don't know me, I'm the founder of the Avila Institute, SpiritualDirection.com. I was the president of AWTN News. I'm also the founder of the Apostolic VA community. And for those who don't know me, I don't pull punches when I teach or talk, speak publicly. But my goal is not condemnation, but exhortation. My goal is to encourage you, to support you, to strengthen you. But sometimes if you don't know me, and you might hear me criticizing or pointing to something that you like or are fond of or whatever, I don't discriminate in terms of shooting straight. We have problems in the Novus Ordo community. We have problems in the Latin Mass communities. None of our communities are perfect. And it does us no good to pretend they are. And it does us a great good to understand where we struggle and where we could be better oriented to the church and God's way, God's will, and our tradition. So don't be offended. If you feel condemned, it's going to be from the enemy. And I don't know, Jordan, is there a Q&A time at the end? Are they able to do Q&A through this software?
Yeah, we're going to have some questions that are sent in at the end.
How will that work?
They're sent in, and then we're going to put them on the screen so that you can read them.
Okay, so there'll be Q&A at the end, and if I say anything that is confusing or offensive or whatever, just feel free to ask about it, and we can talk about it a bit. So this webinar is going to be rich with resources, and it can be overwhelming, but here's the thing. Everyone who's listening today only needs one or two things we're going to show here. But I'm dealing with a broad spectrum in our audience, and there's several thousand of you. So we have priests, religious, laity, and we have, in all those cases, from varying different perspectives in terms of spiritual maturity. So I'm trying to provide resources that really cover the gamut. So listen carefully, peacefully, and see what the Lord wants from you. And then, of course, we're in advance of even pre-Lent. And so you'll have some time to pray about it and figure out what the Lord wants you to do for Lent. So whatever it is, be at peace. If you're not at peace, that's a problem. So make sure you guard your peace and don't feel like you have to read everything. The Lord only wants you to gather just a few things out of this webinar to help you during Lent. So I'm going to talk to you about the foundations of prayer and pre-Lent and just the basic stuff, which will be pretty quick. what is authentic discipleship? What does it mean to move deeper into the castle, which of course is an illusion or a illustration or an allegory, however, it has many different facets with respect to how St. Teresa taught about the interior life, St. Teresa of Avila, and how it is that we draw near to God. So then we're going to talk about a lot of things, and then we're going to talk about how do we get focused. So if you're feeling overwhelmed, when we get to the get focused slide, it only brings it down to two things, and hopefully that'll help you. And then getting serious. How can you really make serious commitments and progress in Lent? And then ongoing support, how you can get that. And then there's a bunch of folks here from the Apostolic VA community. At the end, I will show you in your prayer books where you can focus, use some of the tools that even I present here that's not available to everybody, but is in your prayer book. That'll be quickly, and then we'll do some Q&A at the end. Okay, I think that's good enough. So let's talk about foundations. So pre-Lent, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on what it is. I mean, Pope Pelagius I, who died in 561, and John III, who died in 574, and then Pope Gregory died in 604. Around that period, this idea of pre-Lent emerged, and it's rational to understand why it emerged. In terms of the impetus, then there was a desire to set weeks aside of prayer, a general penitential observance due to the threat of assaults on Rome, that sort of thing. But generally speaking, it makes sense that as we head into the holiest time of the year, that we do some preparation. And so for well over 1,000 years, and this is true in the West, the church under Rome in the West, and the church in communion with Rome on the East, some of our Orthodox brethren, there's always been this period that emerged fairly quickly where the people of God are trying to prepare for this great time. It's easier to understand when you think of Advent, because Advent has this long preparation, and then you have Christmas, this one special day. Well, it used to be similar to that for Lent. You would have this months ahead of time, and I'll give you this illustration here. You can see. So Septuagesima Sunday was 70 days before Easter. Sexagesima was 60 days before Easter. Quinquagesima, and of course, the references are just to numbers. Those strange words that relate to numbers, and they're relative numbers. They're not exact numbers, but these were set aside, sort of like Advent, but for Lent, to prepare for how we would give our hearts to God in Lent. And especially, so when we entered into Ash Wednesday, or that first week, we were really ready for what was going to happen. So we have Shrove Tuesday. Shrove means pardon, which was traditionally a day where we would get to confession, as is illustrated here. And then Ash Wednesday, reminding us of our that from dust we came, and to dust we shall return. So the only thing more I'm going to say about this is just this: it's simply a time of prayerful preparation for a fruitful Lent and a year of significant progress. Why it was set aside after the council, I don't know. There's a lot of really stupid things that happened after the council, a lot of destructive things to the church. Some of it seem to be intentional on the part of bad actors, and others, who knows? So it doesn't really matter to me. What matters to me is it was a very wise and beautiful practice then, and we should take advantage of it now. And we're doing nothing against church teaching by resurrecting these practices. And all you have to do to follow, if you wanted to follow, well, when is Septuagesima Sunday? Just look and do a Google search. When is Septuagesima Sunday this year? And it'll tell you. I think it's February or January, February 13th. Anyway, look it up yourself, and you can follow that along. If you use Divine Intimacy, or you're part of the traditional Latin Mass community, these terms are not familiar. These are not foreign to you, and you'll see them as you come closer to Lent. If you're in a Novus Ordo community, you'll need to look it up and to gain a better understanding of what's going on. But fundamentally, our focus is that it's wise that the church has for more than 1,000 years prepared for Lent, not just landed on Ash Wednesday and said, oh, I'm going to give up chocolate, or I'm going to give up wine, or something that has no ultimate spiritual benefit to you with respect to your overall spiritual health. And then it just becomes this goofy little practice that has no effect on your salvation or whatever. So we're trying to avoid that. So the rest of the focus of our time together is going to be on, well, how do I prepare? How do I take an inventory of my own interior life or my own spiritual life? And then how do I boil down, what can I do for Lent that is really going to be deeply powerful for my spiritual growth? And then also in Lent and through Lent penitentially, but then how do I live after Lent in a way where I have a year that's quite different than my past years? So if you go into Lent and you just do the chocolate thing, I guarantee you it will have no lasting effect other than you maybe have some bragging rights on your friends who blew it and ate the chocolate or drank the soda or whatever. But Lent is a powerful time where the graces of the church are abundant in such a way that if we are properly prepared and understanding in how we take advantage of that, we can really have something special happen interiorly to us. So one more slide on the basics. I love these old graphics. These were all, of course, before the council. You have Jesus fighting with the devil in the desert and overcoming the enemy as a primary principle and guide as to how we head into this desert period and overcome the devil. And prayer is our weapon against the devil. Fasting is our weapon against the flesh. And almsgiving is our weapon against the world or worldliness. So these are just beautiful images. They're very simple. They're almost cute, but we've lost this kind of imagery in our time, unfortunately, that helps to guide us to what it's all about. So the basics in our time, particularly in the ordinary form, are going to be abstinence is no meat, fish is okay. Then you have fasting, which is one regular meal, no snacks, plus 2 smaller meals. This is ordinary form, typical ordinary form, USCCB, depending on where you are in the world. It's probably similar. So on Ash Wednesday and on Good Friday, there's fasting and abstinence. And then on Fridays during Lent, there's abstinence. I would recommend a much stronger penitential approach. I would recommend abstinence on Wednesdays, a traditional day. Those in the extraordinary form or the traditional Latin Mass tend to hold to a rigorous penitential discipline, which is very fruitful. But this is the minimum stuff, and I'm not a big fan of it because I think it sort of plays around the edges, and it's really a capitulation in many ways to, as if the people of God who love God can't really do anything that's that difficult, So we have fish fries on Friday that taste as good as any meal we've ever had. And God bless, the men and women who prepare these, giving their hearts away to the church. But even if you have fish, it shouldn't be penitential. So for me, I love sushi. So what penitence is it for me to do abstinence of meat on Friday and go to the sushi bar and have this wonderful, amazing fish? That's not the point. The point is, one, abstinence from flesh, which draws us back to the connection of Jesus being sacrificed and suffering in the flesh. And 2, it should be penitential. So it shouldn't be a glorious meal, a glorious, fish fry that just tastes exquisite and, could win culinary awards. It's really ridiculous. So if you have a fish fry like that at your church, God bless the people who are doing it. Don't go to it. It really makes absolutely no sense. Lent is intended to be a difficult season. And it's interesting, spiritually, psychologically, it's the more that you fast and wrestle through Lent, the more joy you're going to have when Easter comes, when you get to let it go, and at least part of it, as we'll see in a few minutes. But if you don't fast and you have no rigor to it, it's not a big deal. It's just this mild thing that you do, and Easter comes, and it's this nice celebration, but it's no big deal because you haven't been working hard at it. So this is the bare minimum. I would say look to the more traditional treatments of fasting and abstinence for a deeper kind of a blessing in Lent. So what I want to talk about is what is authentic discipleship. And it's a big problem in the church for whatever reason. And I really see this problem both in ordinary form and extraordinary form. I've attended ordinary form for years, and a traditional Latin Mass. I went this last Sunday. So I have experience in both, and a lot of friends and relationships in both. So I understand the strengths and weaknesses in both communities. I'm not talking about the liturgy. And most people don't know what authentic discipleship is. So when Jesus says, take up your cross, if you want to be my disciple, take up your cross and follow me, most people can't summarize in any substantive way what that really means. And so what I want to show you, and that all of the wisdom I'm bringing to this table today is pre-conciliar, which shouldn't surprise anyone, what it is in some illustrations from St. Teresa of Avila to begin with, to try to dig into what is authentic discipleship, so we can get past all the confusing lack of clarity, and often we don't hear from the pulpit or any place taught in the church these sorts of things, even though they are available in the spiritual doctors of the church. So basically, what I want to introduce to you is the thought of St. Teresa of Avila. So she illustrated the journey to union with God, which we're all called to, in her book, The Interior Castle, as a castle that has many different mansions in it. So what I've had the artist draw for me, or I don't know, digitally construct for me here, is you have this castle in the center, and then it has a wall around it, and then you have the kingdom that the castle reigns over on the outer wall. And to get into this castle, to get into the kingdom of God, we get in through this door down in the left side. Jordan, can folks see me moving my cursor? Can you guys see me moving my cursor around on your screens? No. So that's good to know. So getting into the kingdom of God, you come in through baptism, confirmation, etc. So when you come in, that doesn't mean it's done and you're fine. And there's a lot of really good people, by the way, that hang out in what St. Teresa Avila calls the courtyard of the castle. So that's all of that area inside the wall, but not in that interior wall and that interior castle. But she says that people who really enter into a true relationship with God, where they're going to end up in union with God in this life, and that's even the Second Vatican Council, I think one of the best documents or aspects of the Second Vatican Council, also affirmed by St. Athanasius, our Bishop Athanasius Schneider, he's probably a saint, but is the universal call to holiness, which reminded the people of God that it's not just for priests and clerics or nuns in habits or whatever to come to the heights of holiness. We're all called to the heights of holiness. St. Thomas Aquinas taught that the normative end of baptism, meaning if you live out all of your baptismal promises and avail yourselves of all the graces in baptism, the normative end of that reality is union with God. So it's not just for priests and nuns. So the problem is that a lot of people hang out in these outer courts, in the area, not where the interior castle is, but they hang out in this outer court, and they're good people. So if you hear me identifying you in the outer court, or you identify yourself and you get a little huffy, understand usually these are good people, okay? So they care about the liturgy, they care about feeding the poor, they care about, voting pro-life, they care about, they tend to be good people. But the problem is that that doesn't mean they're authentic disciples, meaning that doesn't mean, though they've been saved by Jesus, or they what did Scott Hahn say? I am saved, I am being saved, I will be saved, right? But even the Second Vatican Council in Lumen Gentium 14 says that unless you align yourself to all the teachings of the church and persevere in charity in them until you die, not only will you not go to heaven, but you'll incur a stricter judgment in hell. It says it. Read it. It echoes, of course, Jesus, Matthew 7:14, which he speaks of the fact that there's this narrow way that very few are on to heaven, and this wide way that most people are on to hell. If you look to Jesus's parable, and where Jesus said to people who said, I know you, there are people in these outer courts who said, I know you, I've done good works in your name, I've been a good person. And he says in the end, in their judgment, depart from me, I don't know you. Right? He says it about the parable of the 10 virgins. The 10 virgins were all good women. They were virgins, okay? They're all waiting for the bridegroom. So they knew who the bridegroom was and they wanted to be with the bridegroom. But only a subset of those 10 virgins actually were prepared and truly living according to the reality that they claimed, and even that they lived in partial sense. But when the bridegroom came, their lamps were not trimmed. They didn't have oil. And then the kingdom of God, in the end, they were on the outside. The gates were shut and they were not allowed in. And he said, I don't know. They knocked and he came and looked at them and said, I don't know who you are. St. Teresa reveals in the Interior Castle that we must know him and he must know us in order for us to have any sense of confidence that we're on the narrow way. And just hanging out in the outer courts, just being a good person, just doing good things doesn't solve the problem. It's helpful and it's good, but it doesn't really solve the problem and get us to what we're looking at as an authentic disciple. So St. Teresa, if I could blow this up for you a little bit, said, hey, I'm going to reveal to you there's this portal to heaven that you can find. And it's in the middle of this castle. But before you get to the middle of the castle, there are 7 mansions along the way. And I've just represented these by rings, wherein you begin to know Jesus at the beginning. We'll talk about this in detail and how you can get to this later. But in the beginning, you begin to know Jesus and know yourself by a particular kind of conversation with him. That conversation matures in that you begin to know who you are in the context of God. He begins to show you what is in you that needs to be healed, what is in you that needs to mature, what is in you that needs to be removed. And slowly but surely you move through these mansions as an authentic disciple so that you do get to heaven, but most of all, you get to union with God, which is what gets you to heaven. So she reveals what it means to become an authentic disciple. I'm going to give you another perspective of the same thing with more specifics. So this diagram, or this coat of arms, is the coat of arms of the Apostoli Viae community. So I'm going to highlight a few points and explain what it means to be an authentic disciple using this diagram. So the brown represents the narrow way to life. So it's broad at the base, like Jesus said, and narrow at the top, and down is hell, as you might expect, and up is heaven. Union with God is signified by the cross and the narrow way at the top, which means that we can have union with him in this life and the next. Not perfect in this life, but certainly perfect in the next. The shield is life. So inside the shield is life. Outside of the shield, above it is heaven, and below it is hell. So the wide way to destruction or hell is below. We have the constant action, God be praised, of the Holy Spirit, who loves every single one of you and who is constantly saying, come this way. This is the right way. This is the way to go. And sometimes we don't always know how to do it. We don't have the right teachers. Sometimes our pastors aren't very helpful. Sometimes we aren't very, diligent in what we're doing, whatever it is. But God be praised, if you have a desire, if you have a heart that desires him, you end up in webinars like this. You end up with the right kinds of books. You end up with the right kinds of relationships. Doesn't mean you can float around and just, count on that. But it is normative, as I've watched people grow spiritually, that he always provides a way. So the Holy Spirit is constantly saying, I love you. I want you near me. Here's a way. Follow me. Say yes to me. Then you have the 3 ways. We won't go over too much of that, but just to say the purgative way is the beginning of the Christian life. It starts in the outer court of the kingdom and enters into the interior castle if it makes progress spiritually. And then, of course, you enter into the kingdom as we described earlier: baptism, confirmation, Eucharist. The problem is we say no to God. And by his grace, he's given us the means to mitigate that no, which is the sacrament of penance. But I love the way this illustrates the sacrament of penance, because it's like a backstop to hell. When you say no, fundamentally, you're saying to God, my plan is better, not interested in yours. I understand your plan. I don't want it. I'm going the other way. Thanks be to God. We have the Holy Spirit that says you shouldn't have done that, and you need to get to confession. And of course, we have the sacrament of penance, which can help us to recover a reconciliation if you're used to more modern language. So when things are going right, of course, we then start saying yes more frequently. We begin a practice of daily prayer as represented by the thurible there. We begin a practice of self-giving and self-denial. We're purposefully living out the faith. We have a constant cycle of renewal, saying yes, purifications, renewal, yes, and all of that. So that's the normal Christian life. The problem is more frequently people are stuck down here in the purgative way, and they live in this cycle of no, penance, do a little good, back, progress, no, penance, do a little good, back with some progress, no, penance, do a little good, back with some progress. So they get stuck. A friend of mine calls this circling the drain. Most Catholics are circling the drain. And if you say, well, isn't that judgmental? No, it's not judgmental. It's just borne out purely by the statistics about Catholics in general and how they vote. If you're, as an example, if you vote for any government that supports abortion, you're in mortal sin and you're going to go to hell. If you voted that way and you died today, you're in mortal sin and you're going to go to hell. And I know that sounds terrible. That doesn't mean the other voting option is great. I'm just saying you can't do that. You don't get to do that. You don't get to vote for any group that sacrifices millions of babies to convenience and whatever else. So there are a million other ways people say no: contraception, participating in any intrinsic evils, regular use of porn, all of these different things that people get stuck in. Most people don't know they're stuck. Other statistics reveal that around 70% of the people who go to ordinary form masses don't believe in the Eucharist. That means they're practical heretics. They're practically in a very bad spiritual state. So when I say most Catholics, I'm not being judgmental. It's just the basis of the data that we have, that we know to be true. So the dividing line, though, between those who choose to circle the drain and stay stuck down low, or who live on the outer edge of the kingdom, and those who choose to become free and make progress by God's grace, is just a few simple things. One is mental prayer and the examen. Those who practice mental prayer, and I'm speaking of someone who's going, I'm assuming by this diagram, of course, People are going to the Eucharist regularly. They're going to Sacrament of Penance regularly, that sort of thing. But what differentiates those, what we might call active Catholics, and let's say that you believe and that you're in, and you're not one of those people who doesn't believe the Lord's in the Eucharist, all of that. Still, the dividing line. So, this is true, by the way, for both ordinary form Catholics and extraordinary form Catholics. So if you're a traditionalist or you're in the ordinary form, it's true. Now, in the ordinary form, it's not broadly comparable. So I'm talking about ordinary form people who believe that the Lord is truly present in the holy sacrifice of the Mass, who believe and try to follow all the teachings of the Church as compared with traditional Latin Mass goers. Both of them, the difference between those who make significant spiritual progress and those who don't are two factors. One is mental prayer in the examen practiced daily. And second is a deliberate battle against sin. And I don't mean just saying, well, I didn't like that sin, that's bad, now I go back to the Sacrament of Penance, and then I do my best. But here's the thing. If you have a deliberate battle against sin, you will not stay in sin, okay? And if you say, yeah, but I've tried over and over, my answer back to you is, I love you. I have no doubt that's true, but you're trying all on your own power and your own wisdom. So my son, who's moderating this thing right now, and he doesn't mind me saying it, had a problem with porn. When he realized he wrecked his life and his marriage with porn, he didn't go, oh, that was bad, I'm going to go to the Sacrament of Penance and I'm going to do my best and try again. He went to a treatment center. He paid for it himself. He drove himself. He said, I got a serious problem and I need serious medicine to get over it. And God be praised, he got over it. So my point is that a deliberate battle against sin isn't, oh, I'll try to do better next week. It's saying, I have not yet resisted until the point of shedding blood, which St. Paul said in Hebrews. It's saying, there's nothing more important than me getting past habitual mortal sin, because it's an offense against God and it's putting my soul in mortal danger. It's destructive to me and everyone around me, and I need to get free. So those are the two factors that really distinguish those who make progress, and by the way, those who are authentic disciples and those who are not. Those who are not authentic disciples and haven't yet learned to be, and that's why we do this webinar, are usually stuck in sin. So what we're going to talk about now is the paradigm of ascent. So briefly, the paradigm of ascent for the veterans of this teaching, please spend time now, instead of zoning out, pray for everyone new who's never heard this before. There's several thousand people, so there's plenty of people who've never heard this before. Essentially, what happened is, over a period of about 5 years, in writing the number of books that I've written, which now written or edited or co-authored, somewhere around 16 books on the interior life. And through that process, studied the lives of the saints, mostly the spiritual doctors of the Church. And there's a common thread among all of them. And then I tried to simplify, what is that? And that's what we're boiling down to. What is authentic discipleship? The first element is they've all said yes to God in a substantive way. They're not going through the motions. I mean, I know two priests, one a religious and one a diocesan priest, who both said they didn't make an authentic yes to Jesus until 6 years, just coincidentally. They don't know each other, but 6 years into their priesthood, that they really understand, oh, this is what it means to be in relationship with God. And yeah, I'm really in. This isn't just a good thing I thought I would like to do. This is my identity. This is my purpose. This is why I was born. This is what Jesus wants me to do. And I want to do it because he wants me to do it. This authentic yes. Jordan, my son, who wrecked his life, was a practicing Catholic, although he left the church for a brief period. And he would have said to you all of those years up until the last year, because he was only out for about a year, yes, I'm a faithful Catholic, right? But he had not had a true, deep conversion and encounter with Jesus until everything broke down and he had to face, the reality of who he was. Then he said yes And that's why his ministry is blossoming and why his life is really beautiful and on the right track. So what's the most important thing to support that yes with is Mass and the sacrament of penance. The holy sacrifice of the Mass and penance are the two primary and most powerful sources of grace for your life. Now, we'll go into more detail later on how you can take more advantage of those sacraments in and through Lent. But in particular, I'll say that most people don't understand the graces that come through Mass. They don't know how to understand how to avail themselves of those graces. They just go faithfully, more out of duty than out of a true devotion that yields all of the graces that could come. Most people go to the sacrament of penance to get their sins forgiven. That's a very rudimentary understanding of the sacrament of penance, a very childlike understanding, and not in a good sense. Immature, better word. The sacrament of penance is not just to have you reconciled to God, it's also to give you special graces that you might overcome the very sin that you brought to the sacrament of penance, specifically if you're struggling with habitual sin and you haven't been able to get over it. Okay, those are the most important supports for your yes. The next most important are prayer and reflection. This comes straight out of Teresa of Avila, St. Alphonsus Liguori, St. John of the Cross, all doctors of the church. Prayer and reflection, we'll go into it later, the details of what that means, but most Novus Ordo Catholics and most traditionalist Catholics do not practice prayer in the way that I'm talking about here. And I'll explain to you what I mean by in a minute. The last part is ascesis, which is self-giving and self-denial. So deliberate self-giving to God and self-denial so that you can give to God and give to others. So fundamentally, this is what we're going to be talking about a lot tonight in terms of each area. So you can think about this webinar as almost like a diagnostic for you. If you follow it all the way through, you're going to go, yeah, I'm weak in this area, or yeah, no, I'm weak in that area. Something's going to pique your interest, and then we're going to give you resources you can pursue to strengthen that area, to focus on it during Lent, not just dumb things like, by the way, if you're gluttonous, giving up chocolate may be a good thing, but let's do it in a disciplined way, understanding that usually if I'm gluttonous about chocolate, I'm probably also gluttonous about 17 other things. And so how do I fight the sin of gluttony in my life in and through Lent and then after Lent and really begin to have success? Okay. So how big is your yes? To Jesus, the person and work of Jesus, to Jesus' church and the magisterium. Are there any teachings you're dodging? Do you know the teaching well enough to know? Most Catholics don't know their faith. If I were to ask most Catholics what is an intrinsic evil, they wouldn't know what it is, or they might say abortion. But if I said what defines an evil as intrinsic, meaning it's all, well, that's the definition. It's always evil in all circumstances, no matter what. And if I said, can you tell me other intrinsic evils that the church says under no circumstances for any reason are they ever okay or good? Most people don't know them. And the reason they don't know them is they don't study their catechism. And maybe for some of you, reading the Catechism of the Catholic Church is something you should do for Lent. And for those who may be familiar with that one, maybe you should read the Catechism of the Council of Trent. You might be surprised at a lot of things that are taught that were taught against in the Catechism of the Council of Trent, or just the proclamations of the Council of Trent, that are normative in the church today and are taught as okay in the church today. So, and it's unfortunate. I mean, St. Teresa of Avila said in her time, pre-conciliar, before the council, when supposedly everything was magically perfect, right? She said that she was given very bad spiritual direction. She went to confession. The priest, I'm sort of interpreting, but I'm confident what I'm telling you is accurate. The priest said, "Oh, that's not a sin." She said, during that period, if I'd have died, I'd have gone to hell. So she was taught wrong. She was, even back then, the church has always been filled with humans, and humans are always broken, and we always mess things up. And even if we have the best liturgy, we mess things up. So that's how it works. So the remedy is to not sit around and say, Father, you should be doing this for me. And why aren't you teaching this to me? And I need to know more, and I want to know more. The remedy is you learn, you read, you pursue your faith, not wait for someone else to do it for you. If you're going to do that, you're going to end up anemic, starved, weak. And even if you stay in the kingdom, he's going to snatch you out at the end. That's kind of how it works. So have you really said yes without any qualifications? Have you really, the rich young ruler, Jesus constantly tried to break this issue down in the Gospels. I gave you a few examples earlier of Matthew 7:14 and 7:22, and then in Luke with the parable of the virgins. We have also the young man that came to Jesus and said, hey, what do I need to inherit eternal life? Whatever he said. And Jesus said, we'll do these things. He said, well, I've done those things. And Jesus knew Jesus knew exactly how the conversation would play out. He knew he would, tell him those things and that he would say, yeah, I've done those things. Well, but he also knew his heart. And he said, the one thing is you have an attachment to wealth. And if you don't give it away, you're not going to make it. And the guy walked away. What does that mean? It means that he was saying he was in the outer courts, figuratively. This is a transitional period of Jesus coming to fulfill all that the Old Testament foreshadowed. And so, but work with me in terms of applying that to today, and you'll understand he would have been one of those guys in the outer court. He would have been circumcised, which for us is baptism, as St. Paul said in Colossians. So he would have been one of those people who was doing good things, but he was holding things back. He was circling the drain. He never entered into authentic discipleship because he wouldn't give up something he was really attached to. So he stayed near the outer court. Was he saved in the end? Probably not, or we'd heard about it. Jesus didn't tell the story the way he did to give us hope that he would be saved in any way. He told it to illustrate what happens when we're not all in. And that's why I love this statement. If you're not all in, you're not in at all. If you're not giving, there are no circumstances in the New Testament of anyone coming to Jesus withholding anything that he did not say, okay, I'm moving on, right? Nobody followed him that was partial. There are no authentic disciples that are partially in and partially out. You're not a disciple of just because you're a good person, just because you have good thoughts, just because you give a tiny little bit of your income to the church, just because you help the poor when it's convenient. That's not what it's about. It's about all in, everything, giving and trying to understand, get your arms around, to grasp what it means for me to give everything to find that pearl of great price, to give everything to find that one thing that is worth giving everything for. And of course, that's Jesus. And if that's foreign to you, you got to work through that. And I would just say it's not complicated. You need to learn, read into the deep. We have a program for Lent that we'll tell you about that's free in a minute, of helping you to begin to meditate and read in the Gospels. But you need to come to really know who Jesus is. Because if he's a guy you can just hang around and be good and not kick puppies and use your turn signals, and you think you're okay, you're missing it. You don't know who he is. You don't know what the gospel is. You don't know what heaven is about. You don't know what hell is about. You don't know what Jesus is about. So Into the Deep is a good book that helps you to know how to read scriptures. But as I say, I have a better, not that the book isn't great, because of course I believe in it or I wouldn't written it. But there's a program we have for Lent that makes it easy for you to really solve this issue of having a weak yes. Okay. So I want to talk to you about prayer and what is authentic discipleship through this analogy. So what if I told you that I loved my wife and that she was the most important person in my life, and I was always going on and on about how wonderful she is and how great she is and all of that. And then one day over coffee, see, there we are, love, hearts, all that. One day over coffee, you discovered that I never talk with her and I never spend time with her. What would you conclude about my claim? And of course, we're applying this to our claim to love God and to follow God or to be an authentic disciple of Jesus. What would you think about my claim, you would quickly go, your forgive the allusion to language, but your BS meter would go off and you'd say, yeah, you're claiming something that is not true, because there's no man that has a good relationship with wife that doesn't spend time with her and that doesn't talk to her. It doesn't work that way. Just doesn't work. But if I told you that the only time I talked with her or engaged with her was because I wanted something, I need this, I want that, gimme, 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 that would also reinforce your previous conclusion that I also didn't have a good relationship with her. Is this a real or healthy relationship, or is it something else? Is it real or healthy, or is it something else? It's important to consider the parallels to our relationship with God. What does our communication with God look like? Most active Catholics, maybe you could put devout, spend a lot of time with, I need this, I want that, gimme, gimme, gimme. Now, every day almost, and this is the kind of life I live. If you know my wife, she's very strong. She has an advanced degree. She's very bright. She's a hot-blooded Hispanic. She's nobody's pushover. But she says to me, she likes to take care of me. So she wants to make me meals and whatever. So every day I say, would you mind making me lunch? And she says, of course. Now, it's not a problem because I also spend a lot of time just talking with her, spend a lot of time praying with her, spend a lot of time in intimacy with her, so that the I need this or I want that, not the gimme, 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 is healthy. But without the first part, it's not healthy. So if you only have the second part, the relationship's always going to deteriorate. But that's what most people, most Catholics statistically call prayer, is I'm doing this to get that. Which, by the way, is more akin to witchcraft because it doesn't have the element of relationship. Some people pray the rosary more like witchcraft than they do like prayer. And St. Teresa of Avila said, and don't get weird on me about this, don't get mad at me for saying it. She said, if you don't know to whom it is that you're praying, and you don't know who you are, and there's not this reality of interchange between persons, you're not praying at all, which means you're doing some kind of incantation in order to get what you want, which is closer to witchcraft than it is to Catholic prayer. So authentic discipleship has to have authentic prayer in it, but it is not just saying prayers. Traditionalists are very good at saying prayers and devotions. There's some Novus Ordo people who are too, but traditionalists tend to be very focused on devotions and novena. Right now, I'm starting Our Lady of Good Success of the Reform novena, and a lot of us are doing it together. I'm all for novenas, and I pray the rosary every day. But if there's not an aspect of relationship, it's not real prayer and it's not healthy. And that's key to understanding what we're talking about. So how is your practice of mental prayer, which is the prayer that St. Teresa of Avila is most famous, also St. Therese, another doctor of the church, John of the Cross, St. Francis de Sales, St. Alphonsus Liguori, all said that this kind of prayer is extremely important. And it's more analogous to that relationship kind of prayer between husband and wife, not the gimme, gimme prayer. Have you yet developed a habit of good time, spending time daily with God in mental prayer, meaning a time of intimacy where you're not asking him for anything, you're not trying to accomplish anything, you're not doing it to get something else, but you're just there to learn about him and to love him and to know him and to be known by him. This is a very different kind of prayer than most people practice. Are you ready for a deeper journey into prayer? And if I will say to you, if your sacramental practice is fine and you don't practice mental prayer, you are not experiencing in your sacramental practice the heights of graces you could be if you were practicing mental prayer. Because it works like this. Jesus gives himself most fully in the holy sacrifice of the Mass and the Eucharist. But the church has always taught that to the degree that you're properly disposed, you receive all the graces he desires for you, right? Well, what does that mean? That means there's a continuum of reality here. So there are some people who go, and we know this from 1 Corinthians 11:27, who go up to receive the Eucharist and actually are going to hell instead of to heaven because they're taking the Eucharist. They're going to eat and drink damnation because they're not properly disposed because they have mortal sin on their soul, unconfessed. That's one end of the spectrum. Then you have somebody who has, who doesn't have mortal sin and just, makes it to Mass. That's a level of grace. Then you have somebody who's becoming a saint at the other end of the spectrum because they're constantly with Jesus in mental prayer and at specific times every day. But that being with him every day prepares them ever more fully to entering in with the greatest possible devotion to the holy sacrifice of the Mass, to receive all of the graces. So mental prayer creates this upward spiral of disposition and preparedness to receiving Jesus in the place where we receive the most graces. So if you're not yet started to practice mental prayer, especially if you're a traditionalist, I would say, but all people, this is a practice that's much neglected and should be taken up. And it's not a modernistic practice. All the teachings I take about this are all pre-conciliar teaching. So this is all stuff before the council. So here's where my friend Christine Rich is going to come on. What we've done to try to make it easy for you if you've never practiced daily mental prayer is what we call a 40-day prayer challenge. We've got a free download that we've created for you that takes the amazing work of the better part, which is a great daily reflection on Scripture. And it's for people who are new to mental prayer. If you're 1 year in, you'll still get benefits. 2 years in, maybe you'll still get benefits. But this is for someone who's new. So, Christine, you want to tell folks a little bit about this? Maybe not. Jordan, is Christine?
Okay, now I'm here. Can you hear me now?
Okay, good.
Sorry, I didn't unmute myself, so I apologize.
That's okay. Well, that's important.
And it's okay. I'll just add to the, to being humbled to be here to share this with all of you. But we were inspired to put this program together, and it's taken directly from the book that you just saw on the screen from Dan, and it's using a combination of how Dan teaches us to pray in the book Into the Deep, and then using the reflections on the daily gospel. So it's put together so that every day from Ash Wednesday, it's actually more than 40 days, but it's every day from the gospels in the daily Mass from Ash Wednesday all the way through Easter Sunday. It's made easy for you so that you can open this, you can follow these instructions on how to really remind yourself that you are in the presence of God, and then read the daily gospel, reflect on it, and then it actually gives you a way to reflect. It teaches you mental prayer. Father John has written these reflections on every single gospel, and like Dan teaches, it's probably the best way to get into mental prayer, to get into knowing how to talk to Jesus and how to reflect with him. And it's something that changed my own life through using this to understand prayer. Because I think even when I started in daily prayer, I didn't go to God and say, oh, give me this, give me this, give me this. But what I was going to God is saying, can you tell me what to do today? Where do you want me? What should I do? So I was still doing gimme, gimme, even though I thought I wasn't, because I wasn't asking for healing or all these, everybody that needed prayers during that time. And I just, I can't say enough about what it teaches. My husband started it last year and went through this 40 days. And then after Lent was like, what do I do now? Where do I keep going? How do I keep going? And so I think we're going to make sure that we answer that by doing something again, bringing, together after Lent is over. But all I could say is that it's transformational, because if you make this time and if you draw close to God, to Jesus, he will draw close to you. He will make it evident.
Awesome. So if you go to, thanks, Christine. If you go to SpiritualDirection.com /Lent and you sign up, you'll get the PDF. Now, unfortunately, we tried to get this for the extraordinary form this year, and we probably need to find a volunteer. The ordinary form passages and just organizing it is easier. But if you want to do it for the extraordinary form, all you have to do is buy there's a 4-volume set of the Gospel of the Better Part, and then you can align it with the readings of the Mass of the Day just through the normal process where you find the readings. So, but this download is ordinary form, which of course it's all scripture in terms of its order of reading, but it's all scripture. So it doesn't matter which side of the liturgical fence you're on, you can still be deeply blessed by it. If you've done this for some time, you've practiced mental prayer for some time, and you want some more challenge during Lent in terms of reading and growing deeper in prayer, there are 2 books I can recommend to you. The first I just brought back into print with the help of Sophia Institute Press, the Prayer, the Great Means of Salvation and Perfection by St. Alphonsus Liguori. It is a Heine-Kicken perspective on prayer. He basically says, if you don't practice, Teresa said the same thing, Teresa of Avila, if you don't practice mental prayer, you're not going to make it into heaven because it's just too difficult. And if you do practice it, you're going to be fine, because you're going to draw near to Jesus and you're going to be nourished by him and you're going to follow him and you're going to get more grace from the sacraments, etc. So awesome book. And then one that I updated the translation of a number of years ago, which is super powerful, is Finding God Through Meditation by St. Peter of Alcantara, who was the spiritual director of St. Teresa of Avila. The one thing about this book that's very powerful is if you want meditations Monday through Friday, Sunday on the Passion, you'll find them in this book. St. Peter has very specific and beautiful meditations on the Passion. So if you have not yet done Lectio Divina through the Gospels for several years, go to do the 40-day prayer challenge. If you have, and you're looking for something to go deeper, Finding God Through Meditation or Prayer, the Great Means of Salvation can be really helpful resources. Okay. Am I keeping you guys awake? You guys awake? Barely? Okay, good. Well, I have a studio audience of 2 of our friends from Montgomery in here. So, do you struggle with destructive emotions? Okay. This is also in the prayer and reflection area. Do you know the peace that passes understanding that St. Paul talked about, or that Jesus said when he said, "My peace I leave you, my peace I give you, not as the world gives"? Do you have that peace? Do you worry about the future? Do you get stuck in regret of the past decisions or behavior? Or do you get stuck in patterns of shame and isolation? Do issues in the world or the church drive you to doubt, despair, or excessive self-focus? And if that's the case, do you struggle with sleep? And why do you struggle with sleep? You struggle, and I struggle with sleep, but it's never about worry. It's just because physiologically I have trouble with sleep. But if you struggle with sleep because you've got tapes running around your head and you've got all this anxiety, that is not the Lord's will for you. And so maybe this Lent, your task is to learn how the good spirits and the bad spirits work, to learn how the thoughts, as I say in the book, some of the thoughts in your head are not yours and you shouldn't listen to them. But how it is that St. Paul in the New Testament reveals that we can take every thought captive to the obedience of Christ, that this is our spiritual warfare and we can be transformed by that and find peace. I reveal in the book, I give a couple of snapshots of my childhood, which were pretty terrible, to just help people understand that, you can come out of an abusive background and know freedom and peace through the sacraments, through the living the paradigm of ascent, through authentic discipleship, coupled with, though, or which includes understanding how to take every thought captive to the obedience of Christ, understanding how the bad spirits work to suppress you and to keep you down and to discourage you, and how the good spirits work to encourage you. So this might be a great resource for Lent to helping you get free of that. How is your Godward self-awareness? Do you know what your root sin or predominant sin is? I'm redundant there. Usually the way to find out what your root sin is, what do you take to confession all the time? If you don't know what your root sin and you don't know how to fight it, how are you going to get free? So some of you may need during Lent, before Lent even, to do a study on what this is. Do you know how to discover your root sin? Do you know how to root it out? There are two resources that are exceptional in this. One is my first book I wrote a good time ago now, called Navigating the Interior Life. In that book, there's a whole section that helps you to diagnose what your root sin is, at least a preliminary diagnosis. And then to help you create a rule of life or a plan of love that you can follow during Lent to start breaking those patterns of habitual sin while you're gaining all of those graces during Lent. If you're more mature in this, you already have a plan of love or a rule of life, maybe it's time for you to dig into the 7 deadly sins and review this beautiful Thomistic reflection on all the 7 deadly sins, all of the ways they branch out, all of the daughters, they're called, of the 7 deadly sins, and then what are the contrasting virtues and how you can fight those sins. So one book, Navigating the Interior Life, will help you do some self-reflection in a very purposeful way, develop a rule of life. The 7 deadly sins can help you, if you're more seasoned in that process, to become more aware of sin and how it manifests in your life. How is your sacramental engagement? We talked about the holy sacrifice of the Mass. It's stupid to give up chocolate if you go to Mass once a month, because if you go to Mass once a month, that means you're in mortal sin. And if you receive that once a month and you haven't gone to confession, doubly so. So do you go to Mass every Sunday? Why not go other days of the week? I see Rick and Joey, who are in the studio audience today. I see Rick and Joey most days at Mass. I don't know what they would say as to why they would go to Mass, but I bet it's the same reason that I go to Mass, because I want to go to heaven. I want to know Jesus. I want to be free. I want to get as much grace as I can. So maybe you can only, we're all blessed. Most of the way we live and work, we can go to Mass every day. Maybe you can only go one day a week more than you go now. Go one day a week more, as part of your Lenten discipline. That this kind of discipline, though, you would carry into the rest of your life. You wouldn't give up at Easter, but we'll talk about that shortly. Where is your head in Mass? Do you get there? Do you arrive early to prepare? If not, why not? There's beautiful prayers of the church that you can find, and of course they're in the Latin Mass. A typical Latin Mass missal is going to have preparing for Mass prayers, but you can find, they're not difficult to find for ordinary form folks. Do you arrive early to prayer? Just get there on time. But if you don't prepare, you're not going to be properly disposed. If you're running in, do you stay after to give thanks for the great graces you've received? That's also part of being properly disposed. Do you receive grace or damnation when you receive, which we've already talked about? So these are ways that if you don't already practice them, and you don't need to give up chocolate or soda, but you do need to practice these things, this is really going to propel you spiritually a lot better than, shallow abstinences of things. Okay. If you want to get your head more fully into the Mass, like what should I read? What can help me in this, to renew my appreciation of the Mass or renew my commitment to the Mass? Bishop Athanasius Schneider just came out with a great book called The Catholic Mass, Steps to Restore the Centrality of God in the Liturgy, which has been a huge problem. So buy and read that book. Penance and reconciliation. Do you go at least once a month? I don't know anybody who's making progress spiritually who goes less than once a month. There may be somebody out there. I don't know anyone. Do you truly understand the sacrament? We've talked about it before, about folks not really understanding that its grace is to overcome sin, but also folks don't understand that you can go take the sacrament of penance and it's not efficacious for you because you don't have a firm purpose of amendment. Meaning, if you're living in habitual sin, let's say you're living with your boyfriend and you go to confession because you're sexually involved, but you have no intention of leaving, none of those confessions are valid. They do nothing for you. In fact, in a way, they harm you because you have this illusion you're going to be okay. And probably you weren't told you can't do that. I'm telling you, you can't do that. You're going to take yourself to hell. Nobody who loves you is going to hide that truth from you. So if we don't understand the sacrament, we don't understand what, I told you a little bit about things of what does it mean to be more prepared to go to Mass. It's a little more complex with reconciliation. Is your confession even valid? So there's a couple of good books. A Catechism for Making a Good Confession by Father James Buckley, FSSP. It'll set you back $1.50. That's pretty rough, right? And How to Make a Good Confession by John Kane. All of these are available through Sophia Institute Press. Obviously an awesome organization. There's a link later I'll give you where you can find everything we are telling you about. But if you are weak on your understanding of the sacrament of confession and you can't explain what makes a confession valid or invalid, if you don't know what sufficient matter for absolution means, if you can't explain that phrase, you don't know much. I'm not criticizing you. I'm not being condescending. I'm just telling you it's true. If you don't know what sufficient matter for absolution is, you don't know much about confession. So you got to read books like this. So one of the things you can do is before Lent, you can pick up one of these books. There's plenty of time. Read it and then participate in these sacraments in a deeper way. Or you can say, this is my area of weakness. I go once a year. Which if anybody who I love says I go once a year and they'll listen to me, usually I won't hide my fear. I say, listen, I love you. You can't live that way. You can't do that. I haven't seen you levitate lately. When I turn off the lights, you don't glow. There's no halo. You need to be going to confession at least once a month, just like everybody else who's making progress spiritually. So you may decide, yeah, that's my area of weakness. I'm going to read up on it. And so for my penitential practice in Lent, I'm going to work on this. I'm going to choose, instead of taking time to do things I want to do, I'm going to read. Instead of taking time to do other things I want to do, I'm going to go to confession more frequently. These can be powerful practices for Lent. Okay. Have you taken up your cross? Do you struggle with habitual, mortal, or venial sin? And if you do, we do offer a free course at Apostolic VA, Overcoming Habitual Sin, which is very powerful. Do you fast regularly? Do you avoid suffering or striving? Do you freely give of your time, talent, and treasure to the level of discomfort? A lot of times in the United States, the way Catholics look at money, we give what we can afford to give that makes us comfortable. But one of the things that you can do during Lent, of course, because almsgiving is a big part of Lent, is give to your uncomfortable. But I would say you should normally give to a level of discomfort. You should normally give in such a way that it decreases your standard of living so that others can eat and others can be ministered to spiritually, or other aspects of the church can grow. And some of you are saying, because I know I'll get this question because it's not that, it's common, especially those who are aware of what's going on in the church. They would say, well, yeah, but Dan, I don't want to give because it's going to go to the diocese and the diocese is out of control. Fine. Give to a religious order, give to the Carmelites, give to Apostolic VA, you can't give to the Avila Institute because the Avila isn't an ecclesial body, but you can give to non-ecclesial, or you can give to ecclesial bodies like a religious order, like associations of the faithful that have canonical structure. The bishop oversees what we do. This isn't a pitch for donations for us. I'm just using it as an example. Give to the Franciscan Fraternity of the Poor, who all they do is serve the poor. Whatever it is, during Lent, you can say, I don't give very well. And I do only give out of my excess, not out of a way that would make me less comfortable in my life. Well, start giving during Lent, and maybe make yourself really uncomfortable during Lent. And then as Lent ends, you can decrease that, but give a larger amount than you did before you started Lent. That's a way of keeping the spiritual growth going. If you don't serve the poor directly, it's a very powerful thing to do. God be praised, my friends sitting in the room here, we all conspired to, what was it, Thanksgiving or Christmas? Thanksgiving, to serve this apartment complex and nearby folks who didn't have much, and it doesn't make us holier, but it does help us to be much more grateful, and it did help those people a lot. But doing that more consistently, are you doing things that make you uncomfortable for the sake of loving God and loving others? Fasting, another aspect of fasting is, we fast more according to the preconciliar model, and so or preconciliar standards. So as an example, I don't eat meat. There's nothing special about me. I'm just telling you, I don't eat meat on Fridays, and it's like inconvenient, and it irritates me, and that's why I do it. But that's traditionally what happened on Wednesdays. We also don't eat meat on Friday, and do that as a norm. We have to go out of our way, So if you've never done that, start doing it during Lent. Start following what is normal church teaching during Lent, and then carry it with you afterwards, if that's your area of weakness. If you want an in-depth examination of conscience, it's free. You don't have to be a member. You can go to apostoleva.org and do /exam, EXAM. And there's an in-depth examination based on the Summa Theologia. There covers all the 7 deadly sins. It's a great way to do an evaluation against this side of the spectrum, to help you maybe target root sins or sins that you don't think very much about, but that you ought to. Okay, deeper into the castle. How do we go deeper? We're in the red zone. For those of you who are finding this grueling, we're almost ready for a touchdown. So what I want to do now is go a little deeper water. So let's say I have people, ordinary form or traditional Latin Mass, or whoever you are, people who are going, yeah, Dan, that's all great. I do all of that. Most of you haven't read Prayer, Great Means of Salvation. I know that. It's brand new. So you can read that. Nobody's read the book by Bishop Athanasius, because it's just out now. So there's plenty of new stuff for you to do. But there's an even deeper level. When I told you that I studied the lives of the saints and asked what is common across all of their life, and then what can I do and live, that was the paradigm of ascent. Those are necessary elements for my salvation. Then I asked a broader question. What were the conditions outside of those necessary elements that are also common to all the saints that I can also emulate in some way, that also can make my spiritual life grow dramatically? So I came up with this Venn diagram of clarity, community, and accountability. Clarity, which we've talked a lot about here, is extensive ongoing formation and spiritual growth in the interior life. And at the end, I'm going to tell you, those of you who don't know, we do that every other second and fourth Saturdays most of the time, not in February. Most of the time, we do ongoing formation in the interior life, and it's free, no strings attached. Establish a rule of life or a plan of love. Most people don't have that. In navigating the interior life, I show you a way of doing that. Everyone in the Apostoli VA community does that. What it is every morning I get up and I sit in that chair where you're sitting, Joey, and I open up my book, and I have my plan of love, a rule of life. And to the moderator, I don't know if you can make me bigger on the screen for a second so I can show them something or not. I don't know. I'll hold it up as if you are. But every morning I look at this sheet, and this sheet has all my commitments to God that are essential and all my commitments to anyone else that are essential. And this is my plan of love. So I weigh myself. Why? Because I have a tendency to slip into gluttony if I'm not careful, and my weight creeps up, and then I don't feel good and my health declines. Mental prayer every day, auxilium every day, mass or spiritual communion every day, spiritual reading every day. Some of these, though, I'm reinitiating for Lent. So my spiritual reading's been a little weak. So I'm beginning in my own pre-Lenten period because I know that's weak. I'm going to start spending more time in spiritual reading before I get out of prayer. For me, for Lent, what I'm going to do, start now and during Lent, I absolutely hate exercise. I know it's not from the devil, but it's almost. And so I hate it. So I'm going to do it as a penance every day. And so I've already set up my room adjacent to this room. I got a little total gym thing. I got things that tell you how to exercise, all that. So I'm getting it set up. I'm using this pre-Lenten period to psych myself up to do something I hate. I love being active outside and building and moving and walking. In the summer I was walking 6 miles a day. But that's an example of a weakness in my own life that I'm going to do as a penance. The rosary, which I already do, fasting, which I already do. So just as an example, that's what a rule of life is. And every day I ask the question before God, did I fulfill those yesterday that I committed to? Yes or no? Brutally honest. If I'm on or off track. I have no lack of clarity. If you don't write it down, folks, if you don't have goals that you track every day, you're going to fudge them. The human person, there's a tripartite aspect of the human soul that will take you to hell. The human person has an infinite capacity for self-delusion. We assess ourselves on the basis of what we aspire to be rather than what we are. And we give ourselves credit for good intentions, whether we fulfill them or not. A rule of life is something that explodes that insanity and says, no, you either did or you didn't. And all my rules, elements are totally black and white specific. So it says, when it comes to, I already have exercise in there that I'm supposed to do anyway. Did I do 50 zone minutes, meaning a certain height rate for a certain period of time? Did I do 9,000 steps or did I burn 3,000 calories? That's before Lent, but I'm going to be adding more to that. So I can't, if I didn't do 50 zone minutes, it's a fail. If I didn't get 9,000 steps, it's a fail. If I got 8,500, it's a fail. There's no games I'm playing with myself here. There's some things that are hard to assess, like was I slow to speak? Was I attentive or gentle to my spouse and other people? That sort of thing. Those are a little more squishy. But the goal is to gain clarity and to not delude yourself and not be deluded by modernism and the squishiness of what we hear so often in our parishes, the lack of clarity. You don't have to be subject to that. So I have daily, monthly, and yearly commitments, personal according to your unique needs and your state in life. If you're a mom with 6 kids, your rule of life or your plan of love is going to be totally different than a semi-retired attorney, like the guy sitting in one of the chairs in here tonight. His name is Rick. The guy is Rick. So that's a totally different thing. You have a lot more freedom, right?
I do.
A lot more control. So they need to be concrete, reasonable, and measurable. I always tell, I won't go into that. Well, I had a guy one time in a Bible study say, well, I'm going to be nicer to my wife. That's what he was convicted about. I'm going to be nicer to my wife. And I said, well, isn't that special? How are you going to determine if you succeeded or failed? I don't know. I'm just going to be nicer. I said, you're not getting out of here with that. I said, what do you do that irritates her? He said, I leave my underwear on the floor. And I said, okay, put this in your rule of life. When you go to bed, did I pick up my underwear? And all you have to do is tilt over your head and take a look on the side of the bed. Is your underwear on the floor? It's not. It's binary. It's yes or no. So that's measurable and it's reasonable. That's not a hard thing to do, to pick up your underwear or whatever it is that bugs your wife. So we need to be clear in when we set out these goals for Lent, and it has to be concrete, reasonable, and measurable. Reasonable means I can do it. I would never put, if I never practiced mental prayer as an example, I wouldn't put mental prayer for an hour a day. This is some of the issue I have with Exodus 90. A lot of good stuff in these programs, but no spiritual master, and I mean all the spiritual doctors of the church, I just read it again this morning, will tell you that progress is made by huge leaps. It's always by this constant chipping away of sin, constant adding a new step of virtue, and it's stepwise, not huge leaps. So the good thing about an Exodus 90 program is it's sort of like going off to a hardcore retreat for a while, but you got to make sure that if you don't have lasting fruits out of that, you're wasting your time. Okay. You'll feel cool and neat with all your guy friends grunting about all your, ascetical disciplines. But if it doesn't make you holier and it doesn't increase your love for God and neighbor, you need to toss it. Community is the next piece. Friendship support to reinforce solidarity. Small groups are absolutely vital. I need Rick and Joey, and I need to know that's who's sitting here. And Joey is Rick's wife, and Rick is Joey's husband.
That's the way it usually works.
That's the way it usually works. But I said it because she's not just your wife. That's not like all she is, right? So I need to know them. I need them in my life. They come every other Saturday. We do formation. I see them at Mass. I need to know they're watching me, that what I claim to be, I am, that I'm really living the way I desire to live, right? That's the power of community, is when we're regularly getting together with people in small groups. And if you don't know how to do that, in Apostoli VA, we have a free course, a free series of courses on how to do that. We have somebody whose job it is to help people get small groups going, and we give you the materials and tell you how to do it and all that good stuff. It's all about the Gospels and learning to fall in love with Jesus and follow Jesus. So it's really vital that we have community and that we have accountability. Accountability and community comes from just what I was talking about with Joey and Rick. Weekly, monthly, quarterly gatherings, annual activities, pilgrimages, retreats. The last thing is accountability. Internal daily examine. So every day I look at my rule of life. Every night I do an examination of conscience with my wife, and when we do Compline together. So we do a daily internal examine. External, we have community, as I just mentioned, that reinforce spiritual direction. Did they get back to you yet?
Yes.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I got to hear about it. You got to tell me about that. Frequent confession. And when you do that, when you put those conditions are in your life, spiritual growth is like a rocket ship. So paradigm of ascent and these conditions for spiritual growth are like rocket fuel when those two are combined. Okay. Deeper water. Again, for people who, this is old school too. I just finished the book, The Devil in the Castle, St. Teresa of Avila, Spiritual Warfare and the Progress of the Soul. So if all of this is old hat, you're good in many areas and you need a new challenge or new spiritual reading, this will be out this will be out in 2 weeks from now. They'll be in the warehouse at Sophia Institute Press February 11th. So they'll be available. Okay, so that's one. They're also available, by the way, in cases for 50% off from Sophia. So if you want to start a group and study this, I don't recommend it for newbies because it's pretty deep water, but it's good stuff. Good stuff. Divine Intimacy. This is a pre-conciliar text written by Father Gabriel of St. Mary Magdalene, who used to be the rector at the most important, in my opinion, spiritual formation center in the world in its time, which was the Teresianum in Rome. The Avila Institute is inspired by the Teresianum in Rome. Divine Intimacy has readings every day on the interior life. It's right next to my prayer area for a reason. I don't read it every day, but when I have days when I'm struggling, I go back to it. It if you want to get your rear end whooped during Lent, read Divine Intimacy during Lent. It is hardcore when it talks about penance and it talks about self-abnegation and all of those things that you never hear about today. It follows the preconciliar council, so it follows the Septuagesima, Quinquagesima, Sexagesima, follows all of those Sundays in kind of traditional themes related to them. It follows the Latin Mass readings, but but yeah, it doesn't really matter. I mean, I don't see any reason to translate it to anything else. You just need to know where you are in terms of the season, and it's not hard. It's not that hard to figure out. But Baronius Press, who publishes it, has a kind of a cheat sheet you can get to make sure you're on the right day in the book, that sort of thing. So we're at the end of the red zone, getting focused and getting serious. So getting focused, I recommend you focus on two things as you head into Lent. One, you will gloriously and joyfully abandon at the Feast of the Resurrection. What does that mean? It's something that's very difficult penitentially that you do, that when Lent is over, you stop doing it. You need to do that. It's really important that you do that. So whatever that is, maybe it's, fasting more than you normally do if you already fast. Whatever it is, it needs to be uncomfortable and difficult. Maybe it's giving more than you do on a regular basis. Maybe it's, putting yourself out there to the poor, which can be uncomfortable. I know that personally at times. Whatever it is, you'll abandon it at the Feast of the Resurrection. Maybe it is fasting from chocolate if gluttony is your issue, or whatever, or bread even, or just some of the junk food that is accepted as good food but is terrible for you, whatever, but that you really like. I used to love coffee. I still do, but I haven't been able to drink it for years because of stomach issues. But I gave that up for Lent one year because I really loved coffee, and I drank it every day, and I wanted to keep drinking it. But when Lent was over, I gloriously and joyfully brought it back into maybe wine might be a good one. One you will retain as a spiritual focal point for the remainder of the year. So we've talked a lot on that side of the spectrum. And this is what people usually miss coming out of Lent, which is why we talk mostly about it. So what is that spiritual focus that you're going to gain through thinking about before Lent that you'll carry beyond? For me, I'm 56 or 57. I don't remember how old I am, but my body has never been my friend. And if I don't stay on top of this thing and bring it into submission to my intellect and will, it will rule me, and it will take me out of ministry, and it will keep me from serving God, loving God, and serving other people. But I have a choice at this stage in my life, that because it doesn't yet dominate me completely. And I can do, when I exercise, the reason I survived a concussion and my brain bleed and all that, and I came back as quickly as I did, because I know there are people with similar injuries that take a lot more, because I was walking 6 miles a day, before I wrecked. I was in reasonably good shape. So even if you're physically weak, it makes you stronger to deal with your weaknesses, if that makes sense. And so I'm going to start that habit, and my goal, God willing, is when Lent is over, I'm just going to keep exercising. I may not do it as much, I don't know, but I'm going to keep it to where it's a normal practice in my everyday life. That's my goal. That's what I desire. So that's just examples for you. But for you, it might be, I'm going to try to go to Mass during the week, every week. For you, it might be, I'm going to start going to confession. It may be more than one thing that, I just say two, but sometimes we can get overly zealous and focus on emphasis on everything is emphasis on nothing, right? So, and you'll frustrate yourself, and the devil will say, yeah, do all of these things, and then he'll kick you when you fail, right? That makes sense. All right, we're almost done. Getting serious. Make a solemn commitment. Write it out. Address to God. Lord, this is what I'm going to do for Lent. This is what I desire to do to honor you. Write out a little rule of life. Ask the Lord for the grace you need to fulfill your commitment. Use internal and external accountability. Have a partner. Use Habit Share as an app, or, Stephanie is my accountability partner in essence. And I also have a spiritual director. But if you don't have one of those, get one. And then there's this beautiful daily prayer for strength and commitment, which we'll send out to you guys. It says, my beloved Jesus, my Lord and my strength, please help me to keep my commitments to you. You are the vine, the source of any good that I can do or pursue. Apart from you, I can do nothing. With you, I can accomplish all you ask of me. By your grace, I resolve to do all that I can to keep my commitments to you and to rise and fight again no matter how many times I fall. I also commit to bring each failure and success to you. For my successes, I will offer you my gratitude. For my failures, I will offer you my humility and desire to get up and fight again. I thank you that you have promised to be faithful to complete the work you have started in me. Lord Jesus, I trust in you. And that's a reference to Philippians 1:6. It says, and I am sure that he who began a good work in you will bring it to completion at the day of Jesus. So people who have success in reaching their goals, write them down. They have accountability and they turn to God for all that they need to fulfill them. That's it. So for ongoing support, if you buy any books or anything like that, please use our bookstore to purchase. It supports some folks who are discerning religious life, one in particular very important to us in Apostolic VA, and use the shop menu. So if you're going to order any books, at least one-off purchases. Don't give to the evil empire of Amazon, please. They suppress the faith. If you're in Montgomery area, if you're in driving distance, you're always welcome to come to the retreat center. Rick and Joey do that. You're welcome to do the formation here. Second and fourth Saturdays, 8 a.m. Central. It's for an hour, so it's not a long time. But our next meeting is going to be on February 5th instead of the second Saturday of the month. So February 5th is our next meeting. So questions and answers. Jordan, I don't know how we're doing this. Do I get out of the presentation or should I leave it up for a minute?
Can you see the, leave the presentation.
I can't see anything, just so you know.
Go to StreamYard.
Let's see. I think I have to stop sharing to go to StreamYard.
Sure, yeah.
So I'll stop sharing and I'll get out of this. And where is StreamYard? I don't know where it is. Oh, here we go. Okay. So someone said, I just signed up for 40 days of peace in the link you mentioned. And it said, as soon as the ebook is completed, we will mail it to you. When will it be completed? So it's with the designer right now. So you'll get it before Lent because the 40 days starts on Lent. Christine, are you up on? Am I saying everything right?
You are saying everything correctly.
I get it. Your face. Look at that.
We'll get it. We will get it to you before the start of Lent, so that you will have time to read the introduction and the instructions. They're all very, very helpful.
Great, thank you, Christine. I appreciate it. All right, Jordan, what's next? What are good Lenten practices for couples not on the same page spiritually? Well, tiny steps to getting on the same page spiritually. If you both agree that doing something during Lent is important, read, I would strongly, and you're both Catholic, I'd strongly suggest you read Discernment of Spirits in Marriage. It's a fantastic book, super easy to read, super friendly, even to someone who's kind of, who's there, but not, maybe as far as you are along. That's a great book. You can just decide to read a book like Theophilus by Michael O'Brien, which we were just talking about Theophilus at dinner. It's a fiction, it's a work of fiction, but it's a safe thing to talk about, who is this guy Jesus, and was the early church, and what was it like. You can read just things you do together that take you out of things you might normally not, have wanted to do otherwise. Read the Gospels together, read the better part together. But whatever you can do together that's very light and easy is probably a good idea. Good question. I can't fast because of health reasons. What do you suggest I do in place of that? It's absolutely not true that you can't fast from health reasons. I am going to fast, as an example, from YouTube for Lent. It's another one of the disciplines I'm going to do. So you can fast from it. Fasting isn't just about food. It's also about stopping doing things that you like doing that even if aren't destructive. I'm not watching porn on YouTube. I'm watching, today, what did I look up? Some video comparing, some tool to another tool, but I tend to get distracted and spend too much time on it. So I want to break it and fast from that. So that's what you can do. You can fast in terms of the kind of food that you eat. And the reason I'm being very, forgive me for being overly firm with you, but I have serious health issues, and I've had issues with fasting in the past, so I understand. So let's say if you struggle with anorexia, reducing your caloric intake is probably a sin, right? So you can't do that. You can fast from, eating too little, right? If that makes any sense. It's doing the opposite of what your heart, your mind, your will desires to do that isn't as helpful to you as some alternative. So that's just maybe a better way of thinking about it. All right, Jordan. If I understood you correctly, you made a judgment saying that those who voted for a Democrat candidate committed a mortal sin. What I'm saying is that it is not just my judgment, it is also the teaching of the church, that you cannot vote for a candidate that supports the slaughter of innocents in their mother's wombs without being in sin. So yes, if that's what I just said is a better way of saying that. So I did say that. I'm 100% sure of that, totally firm of that, not making it up. I know some people in the church are not clear about it. I know we get really sort of sissy statements about it that say, yes, there are other issues too, but there is no equivocation. Abortion in the public forum is the most egregious sin that is committed in our time, and it is disproportionate to everything else. If it was, we have a million immigrants every year, and we have 25 abortions, now you can start talking about, well, maybe proportionally immigration is a bigger issue and helping immigrants and dealing with that situation. It's not. The fact is we're still killing millions of babies. That is the biggest issue in terms of our vote. And if you vote for a candidate that supports abortion and you die, you're going to hell. Okay? Did I say that clearly?
Yeah.
Okay.
I understood.
All right. Why does the church say to go to confession at least once a year as to imply that's acceptable? I don't know. It really bugs me. I've never studied its historical teaching. It just is insane to me because there are no saints who did that. Why would we? I just don't get it. I don't know. It feels like a modern thing, and I don't want to say it's only modern because I've never studied it, but it's just like, well, we can't have a feast day on this day because nobody's going to come. It's like, okay, yeah, but if you said don't come to communion because you missed a holy day of obligation, if you didn't miss and you didn't go to confession, people will start coming. You just have to teach it. You have to live it. So I don't know. It bugs me. I wish I knew the answer. I'd probably be bugged more if I knew the answer. So maybe I don't wish I knew it. But it's really dumb. Is it possible to get an AV prayer book if we're not promised? No, it's not. I'm sorry. It's just for folks in apostolic VA. Next question. What if I feel exhausted, too exhausted to do Lent? How can I please the Lord when I'm in a less than motivated state? Okay. So you're going to really think I'm being mean. I don't want to be mean to you. I really do care about you. And I want to say is, why do you give a rat's behind about your feelings? Now, you may say, I'm under chemo. Now, that's different. If you say, I'm taking chemo, I got nothing to give. I'm exhausted because of that. That's different than I feel exhausted. So I don't know which fence you're on. I had a severe concussion. My brain was bleeding. It stopped, God be praised, probably because of Teresa Benedicta. But my wife said to me shortly after I came home from the hospital, because I was just laying in bed all the time and I'm in a lot of pain. My body's in pain because the accident caused a lot of other injuries. And I still had big scar on my head, not healed. And she said, you remember how you got through Meniere's disease? And I said, yes. She said, you need to do that. And I don't care. She didn't say, I don't care how you feel, but she said, you need to move. So I just started walking through the halls like a little old man, a little 90-year-old man, shuffling my feet, dragging them one after the other. And then I started getting better. So if it's on the feeling side that you can overcome, that's one thing. If you're a chemo patient, and you're too exhausted to do Lent, or your mother with 6 kids, I don't know, talk to your spiritual director, talk to someone who loves you, can help you. But there's always, no matter who you are, there's always things you can do to draw your heart to God. Not always as rigorous or as obvious, but so anyway, I wish I had more for you. I just think, don't give up. Maybe it's just listening to the Bible every day for 15 or 20 minutes more in your exhaustion, just laying there and listening to scripture. Maybe it's getting audiobooks for spiritual reading and just laying there and listening to them. If you're a chemo patient or somebody like that in that kind of situation. So hopefully that helps. Kindly expand your understanding of purity of heart and its role in Lenten preparation. Purity of heart. So purity of heart and purity of intention. I don't know, I will say this. If you know that you're doing it half-hearted and you do it anyway, you win. Because, meaning your heart is not all that pure. So for instance, there are some people in the church who've advocated that working out is penitential and that it's okay to want to look good too. And I used to be on Facebook, and there was this priest who did this. And I always thought it was weird because there was always these pictures of his biceps and him working out. And, I don't know. That to me is mixed intentions that are not kosher. But I remember the first time I prayed the St. Alphonsus Liguori Stations of the Cross. And I remember it saying, I love you, Jesus, my love, grant that I might love you always and do with me as you will. And I knew I wasn't wholehearted in what I was saying. But I knew I should say it anyway. And I knew that the Lord would purify my heart if I would just remain with him. So I think, I don't know if that's what you're looking for, but don't let the perfect be the enemy of what is good, what is progress. So I don't know. If I missed it, you can ask again. Okay, keep going. Your presentation raised my shackles, making me realize that you're speaking the truth. Thank you. Well, God be praised. God be praised. If you abstain every Friday through the year, would you suggest a more severe penance on the Fridays of Lent? If that penance is properly oriented to your root sin. So if you're a glutton and you eat too much, and you already don't eat meat on Friday, then I would say use Friday to get a lot more serious. But really, if you're going to overcome gluttony, you have to regularly eat less than you want to eat. So you have to develop a discipline during Lent. So I did this one year and I've retained it. And that is I fast Monday through Friday, most Monday through Fridays, some Saturdays. I fast every day and I force myself to become hungry. So I always eat after I'm hungry, my first meal of the day. And I always wait at least an hour or two, sometimes 3 hours I'm hungry. And I deny myself when I'm hungry because I can slip easily into gluttony. So if that's your problem, then you'd have to do something that's daily. One of the secrets to developing virtue and getting over habitual sin is when you pick what you're picking for Lent is that you do it every single day. So I've given you things that are kind of periodic, like confession and the holy sacrifice of the Mass. But when you're working on getting rid of sin, most of the time you got to do it every day, something every day. So, but a more severe penance on Friday, do bread and water or something like that, or no sugar. I don't know. You're smart enough to figure out that. Is the book Divine Intimacy the same as the Liturgy of the Hours? No. The reason you might be confused is Liturgy of the Hours is often called Divine Office. Liturgy of the Hours is the obligatory prayer of all priests and religious, and it goes to the Psalms, and they're prayed every day. So those are different. Divine Intimacy is reflections on the interior life for every day of the year. Next question. And we'll go till we have 10 more minutes, 11 more minutes. Considering doing the surrender novena, I wonder, can it be done continuously to help one grow in obedience to the urging? Yeah, of course. The only thing about things like that is, and it's why periodic novenas are so powerful, is it could just become rote and you just memorize it and it doesn't affect you the way it used to affect you. So, yeah. Where can we find those graphics? I don't know which graphics you're talking about. The graphics I put on the screen are like they're available in Apostoli VA, in courses, for free. In my new book, Devil in the Castle, I include the paradigm of ascent for the first time visually, as well as the interior castle is in there visually. So if you pick up that book, you can get that there. I can't send you the presentation because it's has a gajillion, megabytes. It's, it would have filled a whole room of computers, 20 years ago. How do you know that God knows you? I'm praying daily, God, the Holy Spirit, raise you, reading the Bible. You are a good human being because you even care. And I want to tell you that I suspect you're fine. I don't know you. When you live the paradigm of ascent and when you practice discernment of spirits, when you live the way we're talking about here, particularly if you additionally practice discernment of spirits, which the easiest book on that is Spiritual Warfare and Discernment of Spirits, you learn to follow God's voice and know God's voice. Another way is through, and I'm not trying to sell books, because those of you know Stephanie and I, our goal is to be totally broke when we die. So we're giving everything away. So I don't make money that I keep for myself from books. We give it away. So Into the Deep, Finding Peace Through Prayer. When you pray that way every day and you practice discernment of spirits and you're in the sacraments, you eventually come to a place, particularly aided by mental prayer, where you have clarity because your love for God is increasing and your love for your neighbor is increasing. And it increases to such a degree that people notice because you are being changed interiorly and you are changing the world around you. So I wish there was an easier black and white answer, but when you live as an authentic disciple of Jesus, eventually you come to a place of peace, knowing you're on the way. It doesn't mean you rest, but you keep striving. But if you draw near to Jesus every day, in mental prayer in particular, not just reading the Bible, but in mental prayer in particular, the answer to your question and your quest is in that spiritual discipline. All done. That was easy. Can you put up the Apostolic VA website URL really quick? So apostolicva.org. Remember, the shop button on that site takes you to a little bookstore that helps to support a young woman who's discerning religious life with us, who's part of the community already, but is also keeps money out of the coffers of the evil empire of Amazon. So I'd ask that you order materials from her at St. Paul's in Memphis, Tennessee, and she will get you what you need quickly. They're great at service. If you want to buy a case of, let's say, Devil in the Castle, of course, directly to Sophia Institute Press. But apostolicva.org, if you can also sign up there. It's free. Everything in the site is free. And it doesn't matter whether you join the community or not. You join the website. You have to do the orientation. Sorry. It's just so people behave right inside the digital monastery that it is. You'll meet and hang out with some of the best, holiest people on the planet. Like Christine, who was on earlier, like my friends here in the audience. And you will get holy just from being around good and holy people. So if you don't belong to a community, you should really check out Apostolic VA. It's no cost to do it. And you'll be blessed by it, and you'll find all kinds of resources to get holy. So, okay, well, let's close in prayer. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Lord, please help us. We're really, all of us messed up, all of us broken, all of us in need of you, all of us in need of deeper purification, deeper healing. We need you. You are the vine. We are the branches. Without you, we can do nothing. With you, we can do all things. All things in particular that lead us to you, that help us to yield to you, that help us to be healed and to be whole in you. Pour out your Holy Spirit on everyone here, everyone listening, everybody watching the recording, that they might know what you desire for them this Lent, that they might dig deep and do the work to understand where their predominant sins are, where they need to work on virtue. Help them to ask people around them and to give them the freedom to tell the truth that may reveal something we don't like, but that we desperately need to know about what it is that hinders our ascent to you, that hinders our love for you and others. Help us to draw closer to you and closer to one another in this increasingly dark time, that we might be a light to one another and then to the world, that we might, by our encounter with you and one another, be changed and then change the world around us. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. God bless. Take care.